the McFarlane Elite Edition Spawn. Is it elite? I sure hope so, because I've decided to make this guy my first and only Spawn figure. Everything I know about Spawn I learned from the movie in the 90s, so needless to say, I know nothing about Spawn really. But he's still so iconic in the world of comic books that I wanted to have him in my collection, which is what led me to this new release from McFarlane. If they're basically saying, hey, this is the definitive Spawn from the guy who created Spawn, then I can't really think of a better figure than this one to represent Spawn in my collection. And I will say this, there is something about the packaging of these Elite Edition figures that does feel very premium and high-end and, well, elite, ignoring the fact that mine is a little beat up. Hey, I'm Bill, I make action figure videos, reviews, and unboxing, so if you like what you see, don't forget to subscribe and go ahead and leave a comment telling me what you'd like to see next. But without further ado, let's get this Elite Edition Spawn from the Image Comics Founder Series out of the box and take a look at what we're getting here. Before we get into individual pieces, I do have to mention this accessory spread looks a little light, especially for a $60 figure. And my unfortunate bit of box damage is also presenting itself internally, with the two included cards being loose and a little banged up. At any rate, here are those accessories. First, there is the standard Spawn head sculpt looking nice and angry. There may be some subtle paint issues where the black and white meet, but overall this is very clean and very cool looking. And then you get an unmasked head looking appropriately terrifying. I mean, this thing is ugly in the good way, with the stitching going down the middle of the face and all the just grossness that you would probably want from an unmasked Spawn head sculpt. Take notes, Hasbro. This is what a lot of folks wanted from the Maximum Deadpool, an unmasked, gross Wade Wilson head. For hands, you get the two fists that come on the figure, open hands with these kind of skeletal fingers, and a pair of grabbing hands, with the right hands all having the band of spikes around them. There's a necroplasm effect in here to slide onto his hands, but I'm not quite sure which hand it's supposed to go on. I thought it was meant for the right open hand, like the design on the packaging, but that doesn't really fit with all the spikes on the hand. The left fist seems to be the hand that fits the best, but it is a tight squeeze no matter what you do, and it's hard to get it all lined up properly, and it's really hard to get the effect off once you get it on. Additionally, there's a spiked wooden club as a weapon, these two extra chains with these little plastic pieces, and I'm not really sure what these are for, so I'll have to experiment with these later in the video. And to round out accessories, you get this stone display stand, which at least is more interesting than the standard black McFarlane stand, and is actually pretty large, a few inches in each direction. This is much bigger than it looks in the product photos that show all the accessories, so this is a nice inclusion. It is a McFarlane figure, so you get a character card with some really cool artwork on it, as well as the Elite Edition and Image Comics Founders branding, and the Elite Points card, which can be used to redeem for product prototypes or something like that. I probably won't ever have enough to do anything with them, but it's an interesting concept nonetheless. Finally, here is the full figure, and he does look pretty great. He's got that classic Spawn look. The colors are very bright and vibrant. He's got all the spikes and chains and skulls and stuff that you would expect from a 90s edgelord type character. And of course, the thing that really is the main attraction on this figure, the wired soft goods cape. So let's take a look at that. The collar, I guess you could call it, is actually not wired, so you might be a little bit at the mercy of how well it sits when you get yours out of the box, or you could probably steam it or iron it if you needed to, but it is very stiff, almost like they maybe starched it or something to get it to stand so pronounced, so it'll probably be fine straight out of the box. It's also very big and obnoxious. If that's your thing, it's obviously Spawn's, and this is not necessarily a character who specializes in subtlety. The stitching around the shoulders and neck, I think, are a little rough looking. This is one of those areas on 6 or 7 inch figures where soft goods falter a little bit because the stitching is technically out of scale with the figure, so sometimes it can look a little off like it does here. And of course, you have the skull and chain clasping the cape together. There's also this hood on the back, which is wired, but is also stitched onto the cape, so you'd have to pull it apart to do anything with this part of the cape. In the main body of the cape, only the sides are wired, there's no wiring along the bottom, but I don't think you could really wire that part anyway because of this jagged and torn style of Spawn's cape. And one other thing about the wiring, it doesn't extend all the way to the clasps in the front. There's a little gap here where it's unwired, so you can't really have any cape poses that start right in the front of the chest. Without the wire there, the weight of the cape will just droop it back down in the front. Overall, despite a few nitpicks, I do think the cape is really a standout part of this figure, and more than likely a large part of what you're getting for that $60 price tag. I'm a little conflicted about the size of it. For some reason, I thought it would be one of those capes that's borderline way too big, but I think it's just big enough, like as small as it could be without being able to say that it's too small. As for the rest of the look of the figure, the paint throughout is well executed, albeit a little basic. Like there's not a lot of shadowing or distressing in the paint job. There is some, but I could potentially see some collectors wishing for a more grungy look. Both the arms and legs still have pins. I know that can be a pain point for a lot of folks, but the pins are painted to match the rest of the arms, so they blend in decently well. And it just doesn't seem like McFarlane is interested in moving away from pins anytime soon if they didn't even go pinless on an Elite Edition Spawn figure. Then in the center, sort of like a belt buckle, you've got this skull with the chains coming out from the side and looping around to the back. And on the back, under the cape, you've got 2 holes, which, to answer the question from earlier in the video, is where those extra chain accessories snap in to give him those longer chains emanating out from behind him. They're not wired, but I think adding a wire would be a pretty easy and very awesome mod to take this figure to a whole nother level. Looking at the figure as a whole, I really like what they've given us here as a sum of its parts. This is a great looking action figure, and when I think about Spawn, again, as someone who isn't well versed in the comics and the lore, what I want out of a Spawn figure is a badass, and I think that is mission accomplished. Moving on to the articulation of the figure, there's nothing special here really that we don't normally get from McFarlane. Starting with the head and neck, there's not much in the way of tilt going forward or backward on this figure. There's no articulation at the base of the neck, just the double ball joint that's attached to the head, so you're not really going to get any range looking down. Looking up isn't too bad, but could definitely be a little better. In the shoulders, he's got that pseudo butterfly, but it doesn't really help him too much with range. In a T-pose, he will go a little above shoulder height, but the arms don't reach back very far and basically can't reach across the body at all coming forward. There is a joint in the lower chest or sternum area, but the forward crunch out of that joint is pretty lackluster. It does give you the movement going side to side as well as a rotation, but it's a pretty limited joint overall. The same can be said for the waist joint. It gives you the rotation fine, as you would expect, but basically no extra movement forward or backward, and you need to be careful of paint rub on the white section because, as you can see on mine, the red can rub off onto the white of the abdomen. The diaper piece is that same soft material that you might be used to from McFarlane, so he can kick straight forward pretty well even in the absence of drop-down hips, and can split out wide really well with ratcheted joints in the hips. There's no boot cut in the lower leg. The ankle does have a ball joint, there's toe articulation, and the elbows and knees are both double jointed with really good range in all of those joints. Even the side with the spikes performs pretty well. It's very much that McFarlane style chunky articulation that doesn't move super smoothly, but does give you what I consider to be at least the bare minimum range of motion that all modern action figures should have. However, given that this is an Elite Edition figure with a significantly higher price tag, they gave it that branding, not me. I don't think you're wrong to ask for better articulation than what they normally give you. This Spawn figure measures in at 7¼ inches tall, obviously putting him in the same scale as other McFarlane figures, which is what, 1/10 scale. Here he is next to the Deluxe Peacemaker. They're about the same height. Here's the Page Puncher's Joker for another McFarlane reference. The Maximum Series Deadpool, so you can see how Spawn scales with a 6-inch figure, and you might as well throw a Blockies figure in there so you can see him next to something below 1/12 scale. Before we wrap things up, let's talk about this Elite Edition branding and the $60 price tag that this figure was given. And I do want to be clear, I like this figure, I do, but I also think it's possible to like a figure without liking its price tag, because I think $60 is too high, and I don't think there's enough here, whether you're talking about accessories, sculpt, or articulation, to catapult this McFarlane figure to a price range that's around double their usual price. Bringing Peacemaker back in, this is part of the deluxe line, came with decent accessories, a John Cena likeness, which probably isn't cheap, and he was priced around $35. Spawn does come with more, but not much more, and $60 is pretty steep for an action figure, especially a McFarlane figure. This isn't a brand that's really known for a premium level of quality. But unlike many other characters, Spider-Man for example, there aren't a lot of options for a definitive Spawn figure. McFarlane is the only game in town, so unfortunately, this is probably the best Spawn figure we're going to get anytime soon. And that makes the conversation around this figure very different than the conversation around something like the Maximum series, because even though I think most people would agree that this figure is overpriced, it's a price you have to pay if you want this character in your collection. Clearly, I am pretty conflicted about this one. I like it, but I don't love it. I wish it was, I don't know, $10 cheaper, but I'm still glad that I own it. So I have to ask, what do you guys think of the McFarlane Elite Edition Spawn? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy this kind of action figure content.